I'm Menno. I am a principal at Dogpatch Labs, and I'm delighted to be here with Job van der Voort, the CEO and co-founder of Remote.com. Hi, Job. Look, can you tell us a little bit more first about yourself and then about Remote.com and how it all got started, basically?
Yeah, I can do it in one go. So I have a background. I'm Dutch. I have a background in neuroscience. Left that to start a startup because I found Hacker News. I thought it was really, really cool. I did a bunch of stuff, failed the startup, and then eventually joined GitLab early on. And GitLab was a fully distributed company, so hired people all over the world, still is, completely remote. And it worked really, really well. We never felt the need to open an office, but there was one problem we struggled with, and that one problem was, well, if we hire people all over the world, how do we pay them? And we found that there are many solutions, and they were all universally absolutely terrible. And so I figured, well, the future obviously is that companies will operate in this way, where they hire from anywhere, where they essentially operate without borders, but then somebody has to solve this problem. And so I decided to do that. And so I started Remote specifically to help solve the problem that international companies face, which paying people anywhere in the planet.
Yeah, but even when I was doing some research on you right before this, and even when you started Remote.com, it didn't initially start with this what's in industry called employer of record type of thing, right? It actually started with something else. Can you tell us a little bit more about what it initially started with, right? And then also, what was that moment? Because we're having a lot of founders probably tune in over here, right? What was that moment that made you realize this is actually not the right thing that we should be focusing on?
Okay, so the secret is that we knew that this was one of the options we had. And so the first thing we did is we got the domain, because we knew we wanted to make remote working bigger and create more companies like this. And so the first thing we did is we got the domain, and there was an existing company running there. And so at first we thought, oh, maybe we can make this work, make some money, and then we'll see what we do. And so we started out with that, and then after a month or two, we realized okay, we have two paths to choose. One is we're going to build a lifestyle business where we're going to make some revenue and sustain ourselves, or we're going to do this big audacious goal, which is what we end up doing. And we knew that if we did that big audacious thing, we had to raise money for it, which is why we didn't in the beginning say, oh, we're going to start an employer of record, and we're going to open 200 entities, and we're going to do all this. No, so we knew we had the choice. And then after 2 months, we were like, all right, let's do the crazy stuff. This is the first time we're really doing it ourselves. Now is as good of a time as ever. And so we switched gears. So we raised money and immediately started working on the employer of record thing. And so it was actually quite early in the process. And we knew before starting the company that was one of the things that we might end up doing, but we didn't fully commit until we actually raised money to it.
So you could have picked the easy life, right? Probably going a little bit slower and stuff like that, but you actually picked that the hard problem, the real problem to solve, which was this employer record.
Yeah, it's much easier to be motivated by something that's really hard and that has a real impact on the world than it is to just make money. So it makes sense.
That's great. So let's open up right with the elephant in the room. There's a lot of controversy, right, around working remote work, and there's a big movement of big companies that are saying we got to put all of our people back in the office again after COVID, right? Amazon made obviously some big things around that. Elon Musk is quite famous about it. You are a really big proponent of and an advocate for remote work. Can you tell me, is the era of remote work a fallacy, or what is the bull case actually for it in your opinion?
So there's many facts that we know. We know that more than half of people prefer to work flexibly. Remote part of the time or full time. So more than half of people. If given a choice, most people would actually choose a remote or a flexible job over any other job. We know that productivity is higher and it goes down when you get people back to the office. And so there's a lot of positive pressure towards remote work. But the one big thing is that the supply of talent is limited. And if you hire remotely, the supply of talent is virtually unlimited. And so this solves so many large problems that it doesn't really matter if somebody like Amazon sends people back to the office, because in the end, companies will need to hire remotely if they want to be able to grow fast and hire sufficient talent in their companies. And so I really don't see any other way around it. And I feel I understand companies that want to feel a sense of control by having people back in the office. I understand it. I don't agree with it, and facts speak against them. Right? We know people are more productive on the aggregate if they work remotely.
No, it's definitely true, and like you're seeing an extreme case on it recently, right? Where the new CEO of Starbucks is living in southern Los Angeles, like Southern California, and like is being flown up to the head office, right? And like you see that like the supply of talent is finite when you're searching within a like certain geography, and that kind of comes to like my next question, right? When I want to hire someone in the Netherlands or in Ireland, like there are good places, right, that you can actually go and like look for them. What are the tips and tricks that you've done yourself when scaling remote.com, and what do you advise some of your customers on how you go and actually find talent like globally? Because it's really hard, right, in that way. Like, how do you go about finding that talent?
Yeah, I actually think it's not hard today. It's not hard if you say, I will allow you to work from wherever, and I will pay you well. If you say those two things, the demand for remote work is still higher than the supply of it. So in other words, if you can advertise a job, for example, on our website. Yeah. So if you advertise a job and you say like, oh, I want to hire somebody, and you can live anywhere in these time zones, and I will pay you reasonably well, and this is the salary, you're going to get so many applicants that you don't know what to do with them. And so the reality is not so much just about finding a lot of people, it's more about how do you go about selecting the right person for you. And I always think it helps a lot to be very transparent up front. So saying up front, this is how much you're going to earn, this is what a job entails, this is the title, etc. And it will help you whittle down the large number of applicants that you're going to get. Because in the end, so many people want to work remotely, it's going to be easy to find somebody.
Yeah, that's like that level of like transparency, right? And showing that actually like probably helps you attract the right people as well. You made a comment there, right, in saying like you probably are going to get more applications for roles, right, than like you can fill, right? And we're coming then into like something quite interesting, which is like selecting and like whittling down, like what is the like best talent to come and fill that position, right? When you're hiring someone from your own from your own community, you can pattern match, right? It's probably easier. But when I have someone hiring someone in a completely different country, it's actually a lot harder to like figure out. What are the things that you are doing when and advising about selecting the right talent?
I think the first thing is to realize that if you are selecting somebody who looks like you and acts like you, you're not selecting for the actual ability of the person to do the job really well, right? And so you should focus on that. So in your interview process, give people tests and questions that give you an impression of like, how good is this person at this actual job, rather than how much does this person look like me and how much of a good time will I have with them. You should be able to have a good conversation with somebody, but above all, you should be focused on like, is this person able to deliver kind of outputs that I want to see? And like your whole interview process should be designed around that, whether it means just evaluating them like a programmer on like actual tests, or asking them specific questions like behavioral questions, doesn't really matter. I think you just really have to get away from the idea of like, if I get along with somebody, they are going to be a good hire, because that's not true.
What like you've got I don't know what number you're at right now, right? But in an interview you said at one point that in 2021 you grew from 50 to 650 people.
Yeah, we're about 2,000 now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what is something that you realize now about how you at remote.com hire for your own team that you wish you would have known at the start? Something that you've changed. Something that changed.
I think one thing that we feel over the last few years that we changed was like we started to focus on people that are somewhat intense about what they do, and very driven people. And I think we haven't necessarily always done that as well as we did before. I think you always want to hire these kind of people, but people that are like a little bit obsessed with what they are doing, that goes a really long way. In particular in a remote environment where you need to be very self-driven, right? Because there's no office culture to pull you along, so you really have to be able to focus and like break through walls. So I think that's the biggest difference. Other than that, it's mostly the same, right? Like having really clear documented process, really clear frameworks on like how to interview somebody, what kind of questions to ask, what do we think is good, what do we think is not good. That we had luckily when we were growing really, really fast, and we still do.
Another interesting thing that I hear a lot of founders struggle with when they are talking about hiring remote, right, is this thing about culture. Because culture, especially in the early stages, kind of comes like naturally, right? Like especially like under like 10 or 20 people, right? But when you're in a remote first company, right, it's different. Like how did you ensure a tight culture when you were building the team? Like what aspects of the culture are you most proud of that you guys have at remote.com right now?
Yeah, when you're starting out, I think, as you said, it's like emergent, right? You don't have to do anything about it. And then as you grow, one thing, we did a few things. First, we said, like, this is like the scaffolding of our culture. So we have our values, and we want you to align with those values. And like, we were really specific about like what kind of behaviors do we like and what don't we like. And there's a few important ones. One is that we always were kind to each other. And like that was really important, so that there's no space for like genius assholes. And we were always very transparent. And if you do those things and you make sure that people talk enough with each other, then you can build a really nice culture in the company as well. Because transparency gives people hope and trust, right? And that goes really a long way. And then just having people talk to each other, that's ultimately what culture is, right? Which is like, how do people interact with each other, and they do that in a particular way. And so one of the values we had was kindness, but also like, what do you do if somebody's not aligned with those values? So if somebody is, doing well at their job, but it's a terrible human, we'd fire them. And like, that's a pretty good way to give people in your company, confidence that this is actually a safe place to be. And if it's a safe place to be, it's easy to talk to each other, and you start to build a better culture.
So it's really like not just talking the talk, but actually walking the walk around like that. These are the values that you don't just put on the wall or put on a piece of paper, but that like you're actually living by them. And
there's no wall to put things on, so we have to
exactly. Some like you, if I recall correctly, you started in 2019 and we're in 2024 right now. So it's been an absolute like rocket journey, right? That you've on. What are some of the challenges and like maybe pick one that you faced at certain inflection points of the company, and how did you overcome those?
I think when your company grows this fast, you're faced with challenges all the time. I think that at some point, we saw that like the zero interest rate bubble was popping, and we really had to switch gears to the company, and so we had to make a whole bunch of changes. We laid off part of our sales team at the time because we're like, well, we're not gonna do as much sales as we anticipated because we were driven entirely by startups growing up with us, and so how do you do it that you just keep going? Like I've never seen really an alternative. Like no matter how hard things get, you just do what you believe is best and keep doing that every single day. And if it sucks, then it sucks for a bit. I know. I feel like building a startup is like a lot of suffering for a really long time, and that's just part of the journey.
What's driving you, right? Besides making probably a bucket load of money hopefully out of this startup, right? That eventually when it IPOs or exits or something like that, what is the, like, is it for you that you just want to make like remote work a more normal thing and allow more companies to like do it? Or what is your like personal driver actually even behind the mission of this like company?
I think the world is incredibly unequal, right? So if you are born in the wrong place in the wrong time, then you don't have access to great jobs, and even if you do, you might be really poorly paid. And like with the internet, there's no reason for that to be true, right? There's amazing people born in the wrong place in the world. Why shouldn't they earn really well and be able to lift themselves, but also the people around them up? And so trying to have as large of an impact as possible on the world in that sense, creating somewhat more equality or equity in the world, that's ultimately what I hope to achieve.
And I even think that like, and it's a small way, right? But like you opened up with saying like you were like you decided to not follow what probably you had studied in your degree and decided to start a startup because Hacker News, right? Think about it, if you were 20 years earlier when Hacker News wouldn't have existed, then like how the differences are. We're here today at SaaStock, right? And I see like one of the big things that everyone is continuously talking about, like the future of SaaS, right? Like can AI disrupt this significantly? Like how are you thinking about like the business model that you currently have and like the implications that artificial intelligence are gonna bring to that basically?
I mean, I think AI will change everything. I don't necessarily know how it's going to change our business model. I do think that it's going to get much easier to do really, really complex things, right? Like our business is translating like local laws and complex things into something that you can actually work with, and then charging a fee for that. And the nice thing with AI is that it's going to help a lot of the work that now has to be done by humans, like interpreting laws, will then be done by an AI who's going to be a lot cheaper than the lawyers that we pay today in exorbitant amount. So I think it will ultimately, for us, it will help us put the pressure, to put the price down. And put pressure on pricing and make it so that hiring people internationally is going to be a lot cheaper over time. And I think that is going to be really, really good. And in general, I think it will, if you're not adopting AI today, then you're behind, but like in 2 years from now, you're gonna have really big problems.
And I think even as a company, like you are at the right space, right? Because you guys are still young, nimble, energetic enough to like adopt that, right? Rather than like maybe more like traditional types of things and organizations that would be offering this type of solution that aren't necessarily as technologically advanced as you are. We probably have a lot of like founders listening to us here today, right? What are the advice that you would give a founder at the start of their journey and that are going on that like scaling journey that you've just gone through right now?
Oh, just don't give up. I invest in a lot of companies, and I think one mistake that I see companies make is that they run out of money, and they see the cliff approaching, and they just don't act, right? And like the only job as a founder is to make sure that you don't run out of money ever, right? If you don't run out of money for 25 years, you've had a really successful business. If you manage to pay yourself and your employees, so just don't give up. And like keep being really, really, really realistic with yourself and your company, and try to make it work. That's all you have to do. Like, and then never give up. You can just never give up. That's the whole thing about a startup.
That's the thing. Look, Job, thank you so much for your time today. I really enjoyed talking to you, and all the best of luck on your journey.
Thanks, Menno.
Appreciate it.